pretty much everything that you've said in our conversation, Tucker Carlson, you have put at the door of the Israeli government. Now, to some people, that will be evidence that you are anti-Semitic.
Hi everyone, this is Peacemaker. So Tucker crossed the line by going on foreign media, the BBC, and publicly accusing the sitting president of the United States of being controlled by a foreign government. That's not policy critic anymore. That's a betrayal.
In the run-up to February the 28th, and you spoke to him on the phone multiple times. Donald Trump now says because of this action that he has taken, the US and the American people are safer. Is he wrong?
Well, of course, that's an absurd statement. He doesn't believe it, I don't think. No, of course not. I mean, we were told after the 12-day war in June that the United States had eliminated Iran's nuclear program, and then we were told in February that somehow that nuclear program had not only been resurrected, but it had been paired with ICBMs that could threaten continental United States. I mean, the whole thing is a fantasy. The United States went to war in Iran in order to effect regime change, to throw out the people who ran the country and collapse it at the behest and then the demand of Israel.
I'll give you a little fact check regarding the June 2025 strikes. A July 2025 Pentagon assessment found that Iran's nuclear program was likely set back around 2 years. So even the US government's own estimates ranged from months to 2 years. So nobody seriously said it was permanently gone. More importantly, Iran's parliament passed a law in June 2025 prohibiting cooperation with the IAEA, barring inspectors from accessing nuclear sites. So after the First War, Iran kicked out the inspectors, the international inspectors. That means for roughly 8 months, from June 2025 to February 2026, Iran had zero international oversight with enough enriched uranium and technical knowledge, probably from Russia or China, to reconstitute. That's not a fantasy. That's a failure of the first strike to finish the job.
Hard to extricate yourself from a war like this once it has begun. And I think the net effect, and the president himself has said this, is at best to leave the regime in place, give that regime control over commodities that flow through the straits at the eastern end of the Persian Gulf, in effect to make Iran much more powerful than it was on February 27th, the day before the war began.
On that subject of being more powerful, I mean, you will know that the president has said, because of me, Iran will now never have a nuclear weapon. There will be no enrichment of uranium, and we will dig up and remove all the deeply buried nuclear dust. Pete Hegseth said Epic Fury has decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat ineffective for years to come. You don't believe that? They're lying?
Well, of course, it's not true. And it also reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of Iran's power. Iran is not primarily a military power, though it's turned out to be much more effective than anyone thought. Iran is an economic power. Iran has the power to halt a critical supply chain, maybe the single most critical supply chain in the global economy, which is shipping out of the Persian Gulf. And it retains that power because of its geography. And it's always had that power. It just hasn't exercised it until now. And so not understanding that allows you to enter into an engagement like this with the belief that you can beat them, sink their navy, destroy their air force, degrade their missile capacity, and you will somehow win. But of course, the opposite is true. There is no way out at this point from that fundamental reality. If the United States were to eliminate the central government in Tehran,
Calling Iran an economic power is a real stretch, and Tucker knows it. What Iran actually has is geographic leverage over one choke point. And that's not economic power. That's a hostage situation. A country that can block a shipping lane and damage the global economy isn't strong at all. It's desperate. And the fact that Iran never exercised this power until now isn't because it was being restrained or it was being benevolent. It's because closing Hormuz hurts Iran as well. Their own oil exports have to go through that strait. They did it now because they had nothing left to lose after 2 rounds of strikes. Tucker frames this as strength. It's actually the opposite. It's the last card a weakened regime plays when everything else has been destroyed.
it wouldn't open the strait. The strait could be closed by piracy. In fact, you need a central government in Tehran to keep the strait open. And we know that from the Houthis, who were able to close the Red Sea. And many years of war with the Gulf states, briefly with the United States, have not ended the Houthis' ability to close access to the Red Sea. They have it as of right now. So this is an asymmetrical problem. It doesn't matter how many aircraft carriers you have. You still can't prevent other people, your enemies in this case, from closing shipping lanes. It can be done with mines. Like this whole thing, this whole problem.
I'm sorry, but Tucker's wrong again. Tucker frames Iran as an unbeatable asymmetric power, but the intelligence community's own assessment is that Iran is largely degraded with limited options remaining. The US struck more than 8,000 Iranian military targets, including 130 vessels. Iran's proxy network, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, has been severely degraded since October 2023. Tucker also compares Hormuz to the Red Sea and the Houthis. This is actually a dumb comparison because the Houthis didn't close the Red Sea. Yes, they made it dangerous and expensive, but the shipping continued through it. Iran's closure of Hormuz reduced shipping by more than 90%, but that's partly because Iran is actively patrolling, mining, and operating a toll system. These are functions of a state navy, not piracy. If the regime collapsed, the organized blockade apparatus collapses with it. Tucker's claim that you need a central government in Tehran to keep the strait open is backwards. The central government is the one keeping it closed.
Is very easy to understand, and you would have to be either not very bright or under immense pressure from another country in order to start a war like this. And the latter is true. We did this because of pressure from Israel. Now, how exactly did they exert that pressure? That's not entirely clear, but we're going to have to find out. I think we have an obligation to find out, and because we can't be a sovereign country under these circumstances, and we're not a sovereign country at this point.
And obviously Donald Trump would push right back on that. And you have been, until now really, a huge supporter of his. You wanted him elected, obviously, for a second term. Have you completely fallen out with him over this war then?
Well, I haven't fallen out with him. I mean, I've known him for decades. I've always liked him. And I think anyone who spent time with him likes him. I feel sorry for him, as I do for all slaves. He is not free in this moment at all to do what he thinks is best for himself or his country.
What do you mean?
No, he's not free. And we learned that yesterday when Donald Trump announced a ceasefire, clearly with relief, and made its terms, or most of its terms, public. And then that ceasefire ended within 2 hours because Israel intentionally violated the terms by attacking not just southern Lebanon, but the city of Beirut.
So are you saying he's a slave to Benjamin Netanyahu?
So I don't think it's as simple as he's under the control of Netanyahu. But, you could summarize it that way and you wouldn't be totally inaccurate. And again, we know this because the single biggest mistake Trump or any American president in my lifetime has made was going to war with Iran in an effort to change its regime. It didn't work. It was obviously a mistake immediately. Trump understood it was a mistake immediately, and he tried to get out of it this week and announced we were getting out of it, and the Israelis prevented us from getting out of it. So that's the clearest possible example.
Right.
They didn't allow it, therefore they're in charge.
You will know that people, including the Vice President, J.D. Vance, say things like, look, ceasefires are always messy to start with, give it a few days, it'll settle down. Let me move on, because I want to ask you about...
I'm really fond of Tucker, and he's got that much clout. But for him to go on BBC and to call Trump a slave and to say to the world that America isn't sovereign, it's huge. And Tucker says basically his logic is that Trump announced a ceasefire with relief and Israel killed it within 2 hours by bombing Beirut. Therefore, Israel is in charge. Therefore, Trump must be a slave. Here's my problem. Tucker is describing a coalition disagreement and calling it slavery. The US and Israel are separate countries. They have overlapping but different war aims. That's how every military alliance in history has worked. Britain and America disagreed constantly during World War II. That doesn't make anyone a slave. It makes them allies with different priorities. Now, the actual ceasefire timeline. On April 8th, the US and Iran agreed to a 2-week deal mediated by Pakistan. Iran said Lebanon was included. Trump and Bibi said it wasn't. Within hours, Israel hit over 100 Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. That's real. It happened. And it's a serious policy problem. But what happened next? Iran reclosed the strait. Iran's IRGC said any military vessel approaching Hormuz would be a ceasefire violation. Iran started charging ships $2 million to pass. The Islamabad peace talks collapsed by Vance. The thing is, both sides violated the ceasefire, not just one. And here's the part Tucker never addresses. If Trump is a slave who can't say no to Israel, explain the ceasefire itself. Trump negotiated it. Trump announced it. Trump wanted it. A slave doesn't negotiate the terms of his master's war and announce them publicly with relief. What Tucker is actually describing is a president who tried to end the war, got undermined by an ally, and also got undermined by an adversary. And then he couldn't hold either side to the deal. That's fair. But that's not slavery. That's a president who overestimated his leverage. Those are very different diagnoses, and they lead to very different conclusions about what the actual problem is. Tucker needs it to be slavery because slavery has one solution. Break the chains, meaning cut off Israel. But if the real problem is a president who can't manage a multi-front coalition, the solution is harder and less dramatic. And that doesn't make for a good BBC clip.